I want to, thank the many people who have made this kind of online Zendo possible, since really right after the Zendo was shut down. I know it's been a lot of work and attention to that, and commitment really to kind of making a schedule and a lot of activities that have kind of continued our practice during this time. With that said, I'll also say that I miss the years of sitting with other people, of the sort of physical support of sitting with other people. I was visiting the Redwood State Park up in Humboldt County this summer, and something like 98% of the redwoods have been logged already, but the ones that are left in these groves that were preserved of, maybe 100 trees or 200 trees. They tell you on the little printout that the trees they grow from right under the bark. So they grow outward from right under the bark, and that wood is a little bit softer. But the wood at the center of the tree, and these are, of course, enormous, unimaginably big trees, gets harder and harder right at the center, and kind of supports that incredible straight, upright growth. And they also send their roots out, a long way. They're not deep roots at all, but they're rather shallow roots, and they connect to other trees. And they actually communicate and nurture each other. They, nurture each other with, water and sustenance. And, when I walked in there, I really did think of the Zendo. The kind of sitting maybe during a session when there's 30 or 40 people around you, sitting upright and, kind of touching their center, their heartwood. And also, supporting each other, supporting me and supporting each other in the many ways that we do at the Zendo. So I really miss that, actually, but appreciate that I had many years of doing it. And also, I appreciate this because, people can join who don't live near the Berkeley Zen Center, and that's a great thing. I will say that, to begin with, that the last 6 months have been, very challenging for many of us, and for many reasons, starting, of course, with the pandemic, and sort of that's kind of the overarching framework. But, including the killing of George Floyd and the kind of activism and awareness that is, kind of come from that. And the, recent fires that have been so, devastating to property and people and animals and trees. And the blanket of smoke that we all contended with, if we didn't actually contend with fire. That really brought climate change right here, right now. And, part of that has also been the political situation, which is, pretty intense, I think, for a lot of us. And, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently, which, and all that kind of portends. And then, there have been a lot of changes at the Berkeley Zen Center, too. And, our lives have been disrupted, in different ways and different kind of intensity. But I think it's been a challenging time, a disrupted time for everyone. Really, nobody has been untouched by it. And I have been very appreciative of our practice during this time. Maybe particularly our Zazen practice, but, our practice as a whole. And so I am going to talk about our practice today, and also about letting go, which is our practice, and also about letting go of letting go. On the morning that we in the Bay Area woke up to those very orange, dark skies, my niece posted a picture on Instagram of that intense orange and a comment. 9:20 a.m. Every fiber of my being says it's time to get in my car and drive. Escape. But there's nowhere to escape to. And, I had that thought too. And I know other people did. And I know other people are thinking of escaping, if the election doesn't go the way they want, moving to Canada. I mean, it's a kind of a natural, almost instinctual kind of fight or flight response to, what feels like a threatening situation. But I would say, our practice, our Zazen practice, is kind of the opposite of that. It's a turning toward, and that can be challenging. But that's what we're kind of about allowing things to be the way they are. Whether we like them or not, and again and again. And there's a little bit of relief in that sometimes, to just turn and face what's so. When we sit down on our cushion or our bench or our chair, we are allowing, what's so, in our physical sensations and our emotions and our thoughts, our mental constructions. And, our practice is to let things be. When I sat down on that smoky morning after closing all my windows and turning on my air purifier, I felt a lot of things in my body that I didn't like. I had a headache, and my eyes were itching, and my throat was sore. And, my lungs felt sort of, graspy or raspy. And just generally, I felt sort of armored, like, I was kind of protecting myself. And so when I sat down, I just, took a breath, which I realized I hadn't really been breathing. And I, kind of settled. And I began to sort of really realize, what was kind of going on in my body, and sort of soften to it, and let what was there be there. And, I didn't try to control it and push it away. And, I did my little sort of personal Zazen instruction, and, and then I stopped trying to control what I couldn't control, basically. And, when I softened in that way, with my body, my emotions, our emotions can start to, to kind of appear also. And things that we, again, want to avoid. For me that morning, there was, some real fear, almost panic. And, kind of maybe some, just uncertainty about what was going to come next. And I think in my experience, that's quite common that, when my body softens a little bit, we do feel our emotions basically in our body. And, things come up that we have maybe tried to avoid. We've hopefully found ourselves a safe space where, the Zendo feels that way to me. We have our teachers and we have, our monitor and, the people who feed us and everything. So, it feels like a very safe and supportive space. And in our homes, I hope that, we've been able to find a quiet and private space. I have to mention here that the other day after Zazen, I think it was Ben who said that his place to sit, the place that he can get away, is in his bathroom. And I thought that was quite a devoted practice to be sitting in his bathroom. But when we find that safe space and we kind of soften to what's so, we can, feel the emotions that maybe we've been avoiding or pushing away. And they can be surprising. And they can be unsettling. For a long time, I had a feeling that I couldn't name. It was like subtle and sort of a discomfort or a dis-ease. And, after a while, I realized that the word that I would use for it would be homesick. I felt homesick, even though I was sitting in my home, it was just totally made no sense at all. But that was my feeling. A lot of our feelings we're not proud of. We have feelings of jealousy and pettiness and anger and, things that we sort of wish weren't who we were. But, if we allow them to kind of be there, they tend to move through us and move on and not be there all the time. And of course, then there's our thoughts. Again, we sit with those, whatever they are. I want to get out of here. Climate change is really here. Whatever. And, we talk about that in a number of different ways, about letting those come and go. Uchiyama Roshi has his wonderful metaphor of, opening the hand of thought, of just opening your hand and not holding on to it. Reb Anderson talks about making your thoughts gifts, giving them away. Dogen, of course, talks about think, not thinking. And when I first started sitting, my mind was very, very active. I had 2 little children. I was running my dance company. My father had just passed away. My mother, I felt, needed a lot of attention. And I just couldn't imagine what people were talking about, really, when I first sat down. But, this is a practice, and I kept sitting. And, I began to be more aware of, my posture and my breath and my thoughts. And at a certain point, I realized that I actually did know what people were talking about when they said, letting your thoughts go. And I also thought that most people have had that experience, when you're playing a Bach sonata, or when you're skiing down a steep slope, or when you're, doing a carpentry project that you have to measure everything really carefully. Those are times when, you really can't think about anything else. And if you do, you kind of mess up. And, my experience that I remembered was when I was dancing and I was living in New York and I was performing there. And we would rehearse our dances a lot so that, we really had them in our bodies. We kind of knew the movement in our bones. But then when we performed, we would perform in different places than we rehearsed, and the circumstances would be different. The size of the stage would be different, and the lighting would be different, and the floor might be more slippery. And of course, the audience was there, which changed everything. So, you could kind of trust your body in a certain way. But everything else, you had to be really alert. You had to be present. And so, the lights would come on and you would step onto the stage, and then, you would be really focused on kind of navigating this situation. And, maybe you needed to take 3 extra steps to make it to the person you were going to do the next thing with, or you need to be particularly aware where the edge of the stage was, or you would just leap off it. So my mother, who lived in California, decided to come to one of my performances. But, and that was at a time when people didn't fly across the country, at least in my family, that much. And so it was sort of a real special thing that she came. But she didn't want to make me nervous, I guess. So she and my husband planned this without telling me, so I wouldn't, be involved in it. And so when I started the performance somewhere early on, I looked out into the audience and I saw my mother there. And I, thought to myself, what is she doing here? How did she get here? But, I knew I couldn't think about that. I had to just pay attention to what I was doing. So that was a really clear memory for me. And I realized, oh, that's what they're talking about, letting go of a thought like that. And, I think probably everybody has had that experience when they really can't do what they're doing if they don't focus on it. And so when Sojin gave Zazen instruction the other day, which I think is online if you didn't see it or hear it, he talked about, bringing our focus back to our Zazen instruction, our posture and our mudra and our breath. And, I think of that as kind of deciding, of choosing to make that our focus, the way I made my dancing a focus, or somebody would make painting a painting a focus, that we make that choice. It's not as it's not urgent in that same way, but we kind of make it urgent in that way, or maybe that's too strong a word, but we make it our focus so that when we let go of our thoughts, we bring our awareness back to basically our bodies and our breath. And for me, still to this day, that's a potent moment when I can, let go of a thought, even a long thought, climate change is here. I thought it wouldn't be here so soon. What am I going to, just the whole, whatever at point I realized that I've kind of been running after my thoughts, or my thoughts have been dragging me off, and I let go of them and I bring myself back to the present moment. I feel like that moment is powerful for me, and it makes me kind of separate in some way from from our thoughts and our sort of stories about ourselves and the way we have kind of, created our self-image, or our illusory or small self, and really the way we've constructed our whole world. So sometimes when I'm sitting, I'll feel like I'm just like there's some release, some letting go of the way that I've put the world together. It's like I'm deconstructing my world. And I feel liberated. I feel free to be, kind of part of something bigger, really. So when that happens, and sometimes, when I've been sitting a long session, or, you've been sitting a long session, there can come a moment when, really we are allowing everything to be there. And, it can be very quiet. And again, it sort of reminds me of being in the redwoods. And, all these groves are right along Highway 101, and the cars are, still going up and down. But something about the redwoods make it very hushed. And sometimes I feel like my thoughts are like, I sort of know they're there, but, it's very quiet. And, I really can feel, or one can feel that, there's an opening, a container for all of this, a big mind that can sort of allow all the things we like, all the things we grasp, all the things we want, all the things we don't want to be there as they are. Suzuki Roshi says it well, of course. The true purpose is to see things as they are, to observe things as they are, and to let everything go as it goes. This is to put everything under control in its widest sense. Zen practice is to open up our small mind. So sometimes when you have an experience, even a little one of letting go, but even also a big one of letting go, of sort of feeling connected to everything, or some sense of boundlessness or boundarylessness, when everything's kind of in flow, there's a tendency to want to hold on to that, to not want to let that go. And I think that's maybe a common experience. There is a calmness and a relief in this kind of allowing. And, it's tempting to want to stay there. And, in our Zen literature from, the 10th, 11th century, there's a koan that addresses this. And it's a koan that I think many of you are very familiar with. It's both in the Book of Serenity and also in the Mumonkan. And I'm going to use the kind of short version from the Mumonkan. This is case 46, step forward from the top of the pole. And the koan is a little dialogue that involves Sekiso, who was an 11th century, more in the Rinzai tradition, I think, Zen teacher, and but he quotes a teacher from the 9th century named Chang Sha. So Master Sekiso said, "From the top of a pole 100 feet high, how do you step forward?" And an ancient master, that's Changsha, also said that one sitting at the top of a pole 100 feet high, even if he has attained it, has not yet been truly enlightened. He must step forward from the top of the pole 100 feet high and manifest his whole body in the 10 directions. So this is about letting go of everything, of our little experiences, our enlightenment experiences, our awakenings that we want to hold on to. Very specifically, I think this talks about, a moment of really seeing the world of oneness, of the absolute, and, having that experience and wanting to cling to it. And, this comes up kind of frequently in our literature, in our tradition. Ross talked about it in his class on the 5 ranks. And it also comes up in the 10 ox herding pictures. And the 10 ox herding pictures are also probably well known to many of you, but they're a series of ink drawings and with some kind of captions and commentary that depict kind of the path toward awakening, sort of following that path. And it uses a young ox herder and sort of trying to find and sort of tame an ox as the kind of metaphor for following our path and finding our awakening. And I'm not going to talk about all of it, but I will just talk about the last 3 pictures. And in the 8th picture, it kind of expresses enlightenment. It's just a circle, which is completely empty, and depicts oneness, complete, absolute oneness. And you might assume or think that was the last picture, but it's not. And the next picture is a picture in the version that I have of just sort of nature or the world. So leaves and trees and so on. And it's that one, and the caption is returning to the origin, back to the source. And, it expresses somebody coming back into the world who's willing to kind of live with, duality, with the ups and downs and, changes that we're all living with, and letting go of that, sort of experience of oneness. And the last picture is called, it's a picture of a, old monk sort of walking down a road, and it's called Entering the City with Bliss Bestowing Hands. And, it depicts a man living, with, the poor in a city and, living their life with them, really. And so, that's kind of the, a way, again, of looking at this this koan of stepping off the 100-foot pole that, we have the kind of commitment, really, to seeing the world the way it is, to seeing the emptiness, the oneness of everything. But we also have our vow, to save all beings and to listen to the cries of the world. And I think, right now, is kind of a moment when, this kind of question of like, what are we doing and what should we be doing, is a little bit addressed by this koan. And, so, when we step off the pole and, back into the world, we are dealing with, the kind of many aspects of the physical world and the emotional world and everything. And, we have to make choices. We have our commitment to generosity and kindness and, patience and helpfulness. And also, at this point, I think a lot of us are involved in making decisions about, our political action and standing up for what matters to us in this, tumultuous time. So we have to make a lot of choices and really, ponder, what we can do and what we're able to do and what's safe to do. And we have to let go of oneness and really engage with that and engage with, our current situation that we're all living in. One question that I have a lot myself is, what do we bring from that, from our Zazen experience to our action in the world? What's the crossover? If we are sitting, if we spend 40 minutes a day or an hour a day, sitting, what carries over, so to speak? Does anything? I like to think it does. I like to think in some way, and sometimes I do feel this, that, like when I'm dancing, like I have my Zazen in my bones, that it's really comes with me, that realization, that understanding, that sort of soft mind that, allows for me not to be right and allows for my opinions to just be my opinions and allows for other people, to have a voice in my world and to know that, the way that I see the world is just my construction of the world, my own way of seeing it. I guess I think of the election session a little bit. I've been participating, and many of you have, and we gather for like 4.5 hours, and for part of that time we meditate. We don't write letters, and one might wonder, why we don't just sit there for 4.5 hours and write letters. Why we spend time, meditating. And, I don't have your answer, but maybe my answer might be something like, we only can do what we can do. And sometimes that's very hard for me, that I want more impact or more control or more, kind of, like making more of a difference than I do. And, and so, writing my 20 letters, doesn't feel like enough. And, but, I do it, and I do it partly because, I sit down and I realize that I'm doing it with, the whole country. It's so many people in this country. 200 people came to the last election session, but I know many people who are working on letter writing and texting and phoning. So it makes me realize my connection and, my small part that I play in all of this. I'm going to end with a quote about this koan, actually, the Stepping from the 100-Foot Pole, by Aiken Roshi. Let us be grateful because Shang Sha is our teacher of Zen in this age of grave danger to the earth and its music, art, animals, and everything else. He is urging that we move off our seats and transform our attitudes and our systems. If everything is one, then it is also vital that we show that fact in our conduct. Worlds in the 10 directions are indeed my total body and yours, and we neglect this primordial truth to our peril. So I'm going to stop there and, take your comments and ideas and questions. So I will be the blue hand person, and Blake will will, if you just raise your hand or you send a question to the chat box, he'll handle that. Okay, so the first person is Ross Blum. You could unmute. Oh, you did.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your talk. I was really taken by your description of rehearsing in one space and then performing in another and having to adjust to that. And, we talk about our practice being a body practice. And then I had the thought that we sit zazen on a cushion in a zendo or at home, and we're rehearsing in a way. And so my question is, when we get off the cushion, as Aiken Roshi encouraged us, we go into the marketplace and we are now in front of an audience. How do you integrate what you've been rehearsing in your body with your interactions with people and the cognitive side of our practice, the mind practice?
Well, Ross, I have been thinking about that. And, hopefully I'm not performing, although, that's a habit that dies hard a little bit. I really think, it is kind of taking really the experience of softening and allowing and showing up, I guess, with that kind of experience, really as an experience, so that I don't tighten up and react to a point of view that I don't agree with. And I don't, shy away from, someone who is in some way offensive to me or who makes me feel badly about myself, is critical of me. And of course, I do all these things. I do react and I do get upset. But, I think I bring some more kind of, the word I would use is a kind of, like I said, sometimes I feel like when I'm dancing, but a little bit like I have this experience in my bones, like it's in the marrow of my bones.
So it sounds like having a soft, pliable body to adjust to circumstance. In your mind, you kind of maintain a soft pliableness so you can adjust to, as you said earlier in your talk, to turn and face what's so. Right. So even if you have a heckler in the audience, you turn and face and you continue to dance and communicate and connect, it sounds like.
Yeah, one would hope so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a line. I don't know.
Oh, Joel.
Let's see.
Joel?
Hello. Rondi and Charlie, do you have a question to ask?
I do.
Okay, go for it.
Ellen, when you were at the Avenue of the Giants in Humboldt County, did you think about the journey the redwood trees have taken from Asia to North America?
No, I didn't.
That's where they come from. They come from China, and they crossed the Aleutian chain and came down to a more friendly clime of the Pacific coast, where it's damp and foggy. And this process took eons.
No, I like that, Charlie. That's great. I didn't know that.
Sort of like Dharma, coming from China.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that a lot. Thank you. So, Joel.
Hey, hi, Ellen. Thanks for beautiful talk. Can you hear
Thank
me?
you, Joel. Blake, is there a way that I can see people, or can you maybe unspotlight me so I can see them?
It's hard.
Okay, is that better, Ellen?
No, but I can hear you at least.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going. Maybe it'll become possible. Thanks for a beautiful talk. I was really struck by your discussion briefly of the response, like if the election goes badly and everything falls apart here, about staying or leaving. I was very struck because I've been mainly thinking about leaving the country or escaping. And it really brought it back. So it gives me a lot to think about. Realizing that that's where my mind goes. So, thinking about the Nazis, and some Germans left and some Germans stayed. And which ones were really facing it? Probably both of them. But anyway, so I don't know if I have a question, but if you can enlarge on that.
I do have a question, and it's something that I sort of neglected to mention, and I'm happy to mention it, which is, I didn't run outside and, enjoy the smoke. I did close all my windows and, turn on my air purifier. I mean, this isn't about putting your finger on the stove and letting it stay there. This is, right. It's not about that. And, and, I don't want to get into the Nazis, but,
Well, it's appropriate action.
Yeah.
It's appropriate action in the circumstances.
Yeah.
But go on. Yeah.
Well, no, I don't really have more to say, but I just think, that, kind of instinct to run is one that
right.
is worth looking at. So.
Sure. Well, thank you. But it opened that up for me as, oh, wow, this is something to practice with. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Yes. Good morning. And thank you so much for the talk. A couple of things. I'll try to be succinct. One is just to let you and people know that one of the primary people who was an advocate and sort of really in mechanism of creating that Redwood Park was Bill Duvall, who was a student of Maley's.
Really?
Yes. And he was until he died in Arcata, a key member of the Arcata Zen group. Mm-hmm. So there's a lineage there in an interesting way. The other thing that occurred to me is that on that day, that Wednesday, when the skies were orange, I guess I had an instinct to go and really see it. So we drove before we sequestered ourselves in our house, we drove to the marina and captured it so that you could really see the impact of what was going on. And then it was interesting because we went back exactly a week later and took a walk, and it was, such a jarringly different reality.
Yeah, I was jarred actually that it went away.
Yeah, me too.
Jarring.
Yeah, and finally, just picking up on what Ross was saying, at least in my experience, and I wanted to check with you. This is actually a question. My experience of rehearsing is different than my experience of performing. Rehearsing, I try not. I feel like I don't want it to be perfect. I just want kind of the details to be sketched out, because if it's too perfect, then the performance won't be up to it. However, that's never the attitude that I think we should cultivate towards zazen or towards our activities in the world. It's like you don't want it to be sloppy. You want it to be on the mark. So there's a difference. There may be a difference between the artistic endeavor of rehearsing and the actual activity of, say, practice in Zen. I wonder what you think about that.
I think I learned pretty early on that I didn't want my performances to be perfect. That that was a dangerous goal for me. And they never were.
Right.
So, I think it was, I didn't really have that concern, so to speak. And I don't think I know what to say about practice. I think, I've only recently really come to see it as practicing something,
Right.
Yeah, I can't really.
Well, let me make a distinction. Perfect is probably the wrong word. Wholehearted.
Oh.
You want your performances to be wholehearted. And that's at least I do. And I want my practice to be wholehearted with nothing held back.
No, I don't think with dancing I was quite like that.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
I mean, partly because I think often, especially when I was dancing for other people, that I was always performing for the person who was, the choreographer, so there was always some element of wanting to do it really well. But Ellen, I wanted to say something to you. This kind of making this talk has really made me appreciate, the work that you've done in the world a lot. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate the work and there's so many people in this Sangha who are also doing this work. We're seeing this during this election period, and we have a lot more work to do. And many of us are frightened, and I think reasonably, but thank you very much.
Susan Marvin.
Can you hear me?
I can, and I can see you too.
Good morning, Ellen.
Good morning.
Thank you for this really thoughtful talk. Towards the end of your talk, you spoke about the cries of the world and responding to the cries of the world, and you had some questions. I'm just paraphrasing, but something like what do I do, or what should I do, or what's enough? And here's where I went. I had this image of us in the Zendo, as you described earlier, like during a sesshin where everybody's got a particular job. And that question of what's enough doesn't really come up. It's like we're all working together to get something done. And each part is so important. It doesn't matter if it's a so-called small job or a large job. And I was just wondering if you could say more about sort of how you take that spirit out into the world with that question of what is enough and how to respond to the cries of the world.
I think more than anything right now, I'm feeling like, it's a very personal thing, that really, we're all aware of what's going on. But, I'll just use this example. I have a friend, and it's not Andrea. I have another friend who takes care of foster dogs. And, that's her contribution to the world. I would never do that. That it doesn't seem interesting to me in any way or vital. But, my concerns are the ones that call me, the animals and the trees and the people who have been burned in these wildfires. And, so I think it's very individual. We're not Avalokiteshvara. We don't even hear everything, much less can we do everything. But we're called, to each of us, I think, to do certain things. Or, maybe we have, somebody who's doing something like, my husband's church, feeds homeless people, once a week, maybe, that just makes that available, so.
Yeah, I think thank you. That's a good example. And as you speak, it strikes me that the other part of our practice that's so important to bring into that is not to compare ourselves to one another, that each part is really vital and important and enough as it is.
Yeah, I think that's really hard right now. It's hard for me, but I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Blake, do you have someone, or should we go on to Ken?
I'd like to know, there's a question from Blake that is, how, when you're choosing the lead dancer, do you not get caught up on stereotypes and maybe preferences that don't have anything to do with the actual dancer's ability?
Well, I think the first thing I would say about that, in my experience, which was kind of not the traditional, ballet kind of dance, was that, there was a fair amount of openness to all people compared to other, other situations, just in my experience. Ability was kind of key. People who were really good at what they did, tended to be very, you wanted to work with them. You just wanted that. It was just like, it was gold, it was so important. And, I think, kind of contemporary modern dance did not appeal to everyone for various cultural reasons. But, I really, in my experience, generally felt that, not in ballet, I'm not talking about ballet, but in the kind of small modern dance world that I was in, if you were good at what you did, you got to do it. So.
Thank you very much. Maybe time for one more question.
Okay. Ken?
Yes, thank you, Ellen, for a fine talk. I'd like to get back to the idea of performance, which I think has some mixed qualities to it. Usually, if we think I'm concentrating on my performance, that could be a kind of egotistical thing, like I want to appear good. I don't want to blow this thing now that I'm out in public. But another aspect of performance is, I think, quite the contrary of that. It's concern for everybody else. And when I'm head server, I sometimes, and I'm sort of talking about the way that the servers present themselves as they enter the Zendo. And
I know what you mean. I do. Mm-hmm.
I sort of jokingly, and people always chuckle about it, I say, this is like you're performing out there because, look, everybody's looking at you for these few minutes. And so if you, it's not just that you should be calm and so on, but you should also appear calm. Because if you look nervous, like, oh, should I do this? Or did the other, something like this, everybody else is getting nervous because they're following your nervousness. And they're thinking, oh, well, he noticed this, or did he do this? Whereas if you look like everything's happening as it's supposed to, or even if it isn't, that it's no big deal, then that calms everybody down also. So it's kind of like, it's looking at this performance thing is not just like, how do I come off? But it's like, how do I create or contribute to the ambience of the whole scene there? And that's like, I think that has to do with, it doesn't wouldn't be just serving, but that could do for an election session or something else, that you're not just concerned with your own thing, but how the overall thing appears, because that appearance affects people profoundly. You know, if you knock on somebody's door and talk about something, how you appear is going to have some effect in how you communicate. And,
well, you know, I think that's a really interesting point. And actually, you've thought it out a little more than I have. I definitely know what you mean about, you know, serving being sort of like performance. It always made me a little uncomfortable, actually, that, I made that connection. But you're right. And I think everything else you said is right, too. I actually really agree with that. So that's a great point.